Welcome to Retirementals, a podcast that dives headfirst into the issues facing the financial sector at the intersection of investment, technology and financial advice. Hosted by Abraham Okusanya, you can expect raw honesty, critical analysis and energetic interviews. Here is your host, Abraham Okusanya.
Okay, hello and welcome to Retirementals. It's great to have you all here today. I am really excited about my guest today. David Jones is Vice President and Head of UK and Highland Advisor Group at Dimensional. I have known David for best part of a decade now. He's a veteran and of our industry, really experienced colleague, I should call him, if I dare say so, experienced friend in the industry. David, welcome to Retirementals.
Thank you, Abraham. I'm delighted to join you this afternoon.
I am really excited about our conversation today, as I was saying to you before we went live. But let me try and curtail my excitement a little bit. So for the purpose of our audience and those who may know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you are today.
Well, thank you. Sometimes when I'm asked this question and you think about, well, how did I get to where I am today? Because if you were looking forwards in time, you could have never have predicted it. But when you look backwards, you go, oh, well, all of these things that I did actually made sense in retrospect, because I was an academic. I was doing my PhD at university back in the 80s. And
okay, I didn't know that, right? Sorry, go on. Sorry.
So I was working away in London, and I ran out of money, and out of desperation, I had to start work. So I started work in advertising, selling advertising space. And it was not a great job, a horrible job really, but it taught me a lot about selling in a very short space of time. And then I moved on to a nicer job selling advertising, and then I moved into a job in recruitment, which was really interesting. So that was a fascinating role actually. And from recruitment, I was going to sort out my pension, and I met an advisor. And we got on really well. And a couple of days later, he called me up and offered me a job to come and actually be the general manager of the business that he was running, because he classically, he was struggling to both advise clients and run the business. So that's how I originally got into financial services, and had 16 years before I joined Dimensional. So some of that time I was in partnership with a guy in Wimbledon. Learned a guy called John Sheffield, learned a huge amount from him, both about running businesses, but also just basic stuff like time value of money calculations, which I still value to this day. That I was taught how to use a financial calculator, especially in client meetings. But eventually I went out on my own, and it was during that period when I was running my own business that I first was introduced to Dimensional, and I thought this was really the answer to a lot of the frustrations that I had as an advisor trying to find a robust investment proposition for my clients. And the way that it happened, you're probably familiar with Mark Hebner of IFA.com.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Very well-known website. And I've met Mark a number of times now, and we often joke that Mark actually changed my life, because I got hold of a copy of his book, and I remember it arriving, and my wife said, "Don't start reading that book now. Eat dinner." And then I picked up the book after dinner, and I read this book. And it really described all of the frustrations that I had. Why was this active investment proposition not working the way that I thought it should, and what was an alternative? And really set out a lot of essentially what was Dimensional work, but in a very sort of contained format. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, my wife came downstairs and said, like, "What are you doing? Are you ever coming to bed?" And I basically read the book in the course of one night and thought, that absolutely, this is the way that I want to invest my clients' money, my money. And so I started reaching out to Dimensional, did a lot of due diligence because I'd had so many false starts before with other things that looked great and didn't turn out to be so great. I think they called me their most annoying client at one point because I really did sort of have the drains up in terms of questioning the approach. But ultimately, the great thing about it was there was always an answer, and it wasn't just a made-up answer. It was backed up by evidence and theory, empirical data, and it just made so much sense. And eventually, I started using Dimensional. And after about 3 years, an opportunity came up to join as a regional director back when we were a very small team. And that was 2009. The rest, they say, is history.
That's incredible. So what is that? I'm trying to do the maths in my head. That's what, nearly 15 years at Dimensional.
No, nearly 13, actually.
13 years. 13.
Yeah.
So you sold the practice, you sold the business, and then went on to work for Dimensional.
That's correct, yes.
That's incredible. So obviously I came across you and Dimensional, I think about 9 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, something like that, when I was setting out, Finalytic, my business at the time. And, you talked about how reading Mark's book changed your life. Mm-hmm. In a sense, walking into Dimensional's office some, 7, 8 years ago changed my life. Because I remember sitting on this, in this room with David Swanwick at the time, and he was I'd heard of Dimensional, and of course was really keen on the investment approach. I'd been a convert to passive investment at that time, but then again, Dimensional popped up on my radar, and so I thought, actually, I'll walk in, and that's how I met David, and then met you, and the rest is history. So again, I know that many of our audience will be familiar with who Dimensional is, but in case they're not, and at the time, I still do think today that Dimensional is one of the, if not the best kept secrets in financial services. You got this incredible track record of 40 years of managing investment for clients using data and evidence. But, I would say vast majority of retail investors never heard of you guys. So tell us a little bit about, this, dare I say, enigma that is Dimensional.
Well, we don't try to be an enigma, but I think you probably said it well, because we never set out to work with retail investors. And so, when David Booth and his partners originally started Dimensional 40 years ago this year, they really thought of it as an institutional business. They were offering specific solutions at that time. When they started, it was a small cap fund, and we won't get into all the details of that, but it was really bringing those solutions to institutional investors. And it was an advisor called Darren Wheeler who recognized how transformational that could be as an approach working with his clients. And he talked Dimensional into letting him as an advisor use funds, and saw an opportunity to take that message to other like-minded advisors. So that was 1989, 1990, and that was really the start of the advisor business. But we were always very clear that we placed sort of the advisor essentially in that process. We think that there's a huge amount of value that advisors offer, and we work very hard to support advisors in the work that they do. So we tend to make less noise, as it were, about Dimensional itself, and we try to work with advisors who recognize what we're trying to do, understand how we set about managing money, why we take the decisions that we make, what informs those decisions. And of course, we rely heavily on the academic work. And interestingly, you mentioned a PhD, my second PhD, but since coming back to work on that, I've really appreciated so much more about the scientific method and how that informs what we do. We have theory and we have evidence, and you have ideas and you test those ideas with data, and then you try and see if there's anything meaningful in that, and then you publish your results, and then people have at it. And if it survives, lots of peer review and people really testing the validity of those ideas, then you think there's probably something there that you can do something with. And even if you've established that there might be some sort of theoretical basis for an effect that you observe, and it could be a premium that you observe, it still doesn't mean that you can implement it in the real world. So I think what Dimensional has done somewhat uniquely, not completely uniquely, but somewhat uniquely, is being able to marry that, the working with the finest academic minds, but then finding the implementation, the commercial application of those ideas. So I sometimes use the analogy a bit like if you go to Cambridge or Oxford and on the outskirts of the city, you've got a science park. Well, the science park is there to work closely with the theoretical scientists who are coming up with really interesting things. And then they go, okay, so if we apply the right environment, if we give them access to funding, venture capital, and we try and bring these ideas to market. And I think Dimensional is a little bit like that in terms of the finance world. We see lots of research, and that research really, in many respects, is public domain. People are publishing papers all the time. Our research department is looking at those papers, and they see something interesting, and they'll try and replicate the results. They'll do out of sample testing, and then they'll see if there's a way that you can use the research in order to improve the outcomes for clients. And so a huge amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, taking ideas, testing them to destruction, seeing if you can put them into an investable strategy for clients that will make sense and deliver it cost effectively.
Now, a word from our sponsor. Nikki Heaton-Jones is the Managing Director and the Chief Investment Officer at Betafolio, the high-tech, low-cost, discretionary model portfolio manager. There aren't many flat-fee, retainer-based model portfolio services out there. Why is Betafolio pioneering this approach?
I think we're more than a flat-fee model portfolio service. We're a true investment partner. We're offering a full investment service to advisors and taking it to a deeper level. We don't just want to push a button and send an investment template. We're building technology and processes so that we can support advisors at the individual client level with client portfolios on real practical issues like cash management and decumulation and lots of other areas that are associated with actually implementing a financial plan rather than just providing a model portfolio. So that's where I see us as being pioneering and perhaps taking the MPS product to a new level.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Let's move on. So maybe we'll come back to Dimensional a little bit, but I want to get further into your story and some of the work that you've done. So as if the first stab at your PhD wasn't enough, and by the way, I'm interested in what the first one was, but you went back to do a second attempt at the PhD, and this time you are looking at the value of advice. Tell us a little bit give us a little bit of a background to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the interest of full disclosure, that I didn't finish the first one because I ran out of cash. But that one was on American foreign policy around the Vietnam War and the But anyway,
Interesting.
long since in the past. But the second time around, there was a question that was really nagging away at me. One, I was interested to go back and do more academic work. I enjoyed doing it, and I thought that this would be interesting. But you can't really do that. You don't subject yourself to a PhD unless there's something that's really nagging away at you. It becomes the itch that you just can't scratch. And it was this question about the value of advice, or the value of financial planning, and the extent to which, going back to my earlier comment, I really do believe that the vast majority of people on the planet would be better off by putting in place a financial plan, having an idea of what their goals are, and a structured process by which they could fund them and ultimately achieve them. So one of the things this is going back sort of about 25 years, but I would really notice about people is, provided they have enough. So there is a case where there are people who really are making heartbreaking trade-offs with their money as to, can I eat this week? Can I heat my house? Can I feed my kids? These kind of things. And they are acutely aware of the money that they have or don't have. But provided people have enough, especially in sort of a very well-off country like the UK or similar, they're kind of unconscious around their money. And they don't really think about it in the way that I think they should. So I developed this sort of 4-question test of money consciousness very, very quickly. And I think I did it at your Science of Retirement conference, where we had the whole room put their hands up, and then we tested, did people know how much money they had in their pockets, or how much they spent last month? And I think we got a room of 400 people down to one individual, which is about the sort of normal odds that, vast majority of people really can't tell you what they spent last month or how much money they've got on them. So I've always felt that actually bringing the power of advice to more broadly to society would be so beneficial. But the challenge is, how do you get people to understand that advice is actually valuable? And so these were all questions that were really sort of nagging away at me. And then of course you add into that problem is, well, advice is there is value to it, but also what should you pay for it and how should you pay for it? Because again, there's a sort of huge discrepancy in what people think they should pay and what advisors actually will need in terms of, actually we need this in order to run a long-term business in the right way. And so that's where it started really. And when you get into a PhD, you'll come in with an idea, and everybody knows that what will happen as you start to read is you'll evolve different thought processes around it. But ultimately you have to get to a theory. What's my theory? And then gather data and test whether that theory comes true. So the work that I'm doing is I'm trying to find a more unified way of expressing where the value of advice is. So there's quite a lot of academic work that is done in terms of evaluating let's say the economic outcome of advice. So if you take two populations, you have a population that isn't advised, you have a population that is, and you can measure portfolio outcomes as a result of advice and conclude that actually the advised population had better economic outcomes, then you say, well, we conclude that advice is a good thing. And then you'll have people who say, yes, that is true, but then you have to throw in the sort of information asymmetry, skewed incentives around how people historically have been paid commissions, still are in other parts of the world. And so other academics will come down on the side of saying, no, actually advice isn't valuable. It costs people more than it's worth. But if you look at the totality of a proposition, and I've tried to express this sort of in a formula in some respects, and say, well, what is it? What would you put in the formula? And so the first thing is you'd say knowledge. So advisors spend a lot of time accumulating what we'd like to think is relevant knowledge, and that could be knowledge about tax or estate planning or asset allocation or investment selection, but it isn't knowledge for its own sake. So you could say in the equation we'd have capital K and then a little a. Say, well, the A is for applied knowledge, so KA.
Right.
So it's the understanding of a client's unique situation, their goals, their circumstances, the resources that they have. And so you're trying to bring your knowledge to bear on that person's situation. But then you add the other part of it, which is the organizational aspects. So we know if you're going to get your house remodeled or you're going to do certain things to your car, you know that you could do them yourself. You could actually acquire the knowledge. But then there's also the organization around that knowledge where you might not have the right tools. You know, the professional turns up and they've got all the right kit. You don't have to go down to Homebase and buy amateur versions of the same kit. They've got all the tools, they've got everything works, and they've got the right structure and organization. So it's easier for them to apply their knowledge because they've got the structure to do it in. Same with financial services. Yes, you could do it yourself. It's going to take you a long time to acquire the knowledge, but then you've got to be able to put it into some kind of framework. And so the organizational aspects, very, very important in terms of the value of advice. Then you can add on another aspect, which is something that's talked so much more about now. It's always been part of the advisor's remit, which is the behavioral management. And so now you can read the literature on all the behavioral biases, the things that none of us immune to in terms of how we respond to various challenges that we have, and being able to manage behavior, particularly around money, particularly when things are, let's say, volatile in the market. And so there is a value to somebody being able to stop you harming, self-harming, I think, let's put it that way. And so let's say that those, the KA plus O plus B small m behavior management, you put that in the brackets and say, actually, there's another aspect to this, and I call it the exponential, which is R. So you raise that to the power of relationship. Okay, now that's a sort of a way that I encapsulate what that work is. Of course, you then have to take it to another level using econometric factors and willingness to pay and all the rest of it. But essentially what I'm trying to look is saying, you've got work that's been done on all of these different aspects of it discretely, but is there a way that we can pull all that together and actually equate where is the value of advice? And because the other side to value is price, and people's willingness to pay the price in order to determine value. And then, of course, you add in the time varying nature of people's assessment of whether things are valuable, because it's an intensely subjective thing. And that's where the challenge lies, in really trying to dig into advice is valuable. So hypothesis, advice, being advised is a good thing. But it's way more than just a narrow definition of an economic outcome. There's the whole range of things that you can put into the experience. Question then arises, well, how do you evaluate that? And there's some really interesting statistical techniques, which your listeners will be hugely relieved I'm not going to go into. But there is actually a way of sort of evaluating all the constituent parts and how people put different weightings on the importance of the different parts of that. So ultimately, it'll be trying to test whether when people sort of evaluate different parts of an advice proposition, we can arrive at, yes, there is a value to that you could compute. So I'm sort of thinking up interesting tests and interesting things for people to do in evaluating
I find this really incredible, and I think that the thing for me is that as you talk through this, at some point I thought to myself, oh, we're in a classroom, right? Because you came up with a formula which I I'm sort of what's the word? Acronymizing it.
Yeah.
It's what? COB, as in K,
KA.
knowledge,
Yeah.
O, and the behavioral element. So I'm thinking to myself, and then you multiply by the relationship. So I'm thinking to myself, I get the value of this, which is to be able to, put some sort of value for an individual on the advice or the financial planning that they're about to receive. So is it that ultimately we get to a way where you can individualize this and you can say, well, if you take K plus O plus B, based on your level of wealth and preparedness to pay for advice and what it might cost, actually there is value in it for you. Yeah. Whereas you might take somebody else, maybe a younger person, I don't know, I'm making this up, and who is in uni or college or whatever, and when you add the K and O and B together and you sum this up versus what they're going to pay for it, maybe there isn't value there. Is that where we get to?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely, because people's assessment of what is valuable is intensely personal to them, isn't it? And of course that's skewed by all sorts of different things. So take a very simple example. If you look at people's choices of wristwatch, essentially the wristwatch does exactly the same thing. So why would you pay several thousand for a watch when a watch does the same thing? And by the way, Swatch probably made the mechanism that sits inside your expensive watch, because there's actually so many things wrapped up in that decision around the communication of status and wealth, and how you feel about yourself, how you want other people to look at you. So you're making a very personal decision and trade-off between the importance of an expensive timepiece against another timepiece that is very functional and costs a fraction of that, and but does exactly the same job. And so again, when you're applying that to advice, some of the things that I'm thinking about at the moment is, are you able to sort of see whether there's certain thresholds that people reach where it goes beyond what you'd imagine your personal competence and comfort would be, as opposed to you step beyond that. So something I was thinking of was in terms of, let's say that you assess people's attitude to a windfall. So they get a certain amount of money as a windfall. So let's say, for the purpose of this thought experiment, you go into your WH Smith and on a whim you pick off a scratch card, and you walk out and you scratch off and you go, oh, I've won. So let's say, take an amount of money. I've won £100. Okay. So if you said to somebody, okay, £100, they're probably not thinking, I've got to go and get some financial advice on what to do with this £100. And they've probably got in their head, well, let's go and have a nice meal out. So that money will equate to something in their mind. So you could take it to a point of saying, what if you got 10,000? And for somebody, that might mean that is so beyond my comfort of any lump sum of money I've ever had. I probably need to ask somebody what to do with it. Now, it may not be formally in terms of financial advisor, but it could well be, I need to speak to my dad, or I need to speak to somebody. Hey, I've got this £10,000. What should I do? Now, for a wealthier person, that just gets integrated within their overall plan, and it doesn't really make a difference. Well, what about 100,000? Oh, now you're getting into a whole different level where people are saying, yeah, I've got to probably do something significant with this. Well, maybe I could pay off my mortgage, or I could start to put a significant amount away as savings. I keep up a little bit to enjoy, but I've got to do something with this money. And at that, do you need advice at that level? Do we take you on to the next level, next? So I think one of the things that'd be really interesting to do is to sort of test where those thresholds are. Another threshold, for example, comes around complexity. If somebody is suddenly asked to complete a tax return, who's never had to do. Now, you and I have probably been online, done our tax returns. Takes 5 minutes.
Online, I guess you don't do yours on the 30th of January. So, okay.
Or you contrast that because, for example, with a US tax return, which is a horrendous experience.
Yeah.
So again, maybe you hit a barrier of complexity and you go, actually, at this point, what I would pay somebody to take that problem away is really worth it. And so be interesting to test where those thresholds might sit. I suspect, Abraham, we've probably tested your listeners' patience enough in terms of this subject, and we should probably move on.
All right, agreed. Okay, so let's move on then. I know that you've done a lot of thinking around the psychology of happiness in retirement. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that, during our conversation, this came by, as you were approaching the age of 60, which is an incredible milestone. So talk us through how you how you now approach and think about this subject of how do we find happiness in retirement?
That's such a great question because I think lots of people have seen examples of, whether it's relations or friends, people who they know who've retired and have gone downhill really quickly after retirement. And I think there's a real issue with people where their whole identity is wrapped up in the identity that they had when they were working. And then when that identity is taken away, they really don't know who they are anymore, and their lives lack structure. In a sense, their lives lack meaning. And so I think as human beings, we've got certain problems in life that we have to solve. For example, if we want a partner in life, then we have to put some effort into finding the right partner in life, and that doesn't always work out. Sometimes people have to find other partners in life, but that ultimately they say to be happy, be with the right person. And certainly going into retirement, one of the things that I talked to my wife about was that, hey, this whole period of lockdown where we've essentially, it's been the two of us together for a long period of time. I mean, it really points out to us that, yeah, absolutely, we can live perfectly happily together. And if I was retired, this really wasn't an issue.
We didn't drive our crazy.
We didn't. We coexisted perfectly happily. And the second thing is, which becomes more and more, is a sense of purpose. I think that ultimately, we derive a lot of meaning, a lot of purpose from the work that we do, but it goes beyond that. And for me, part of the attraction of the PhD is that there is a purpose which is around learning. So I believe that as human beings, we are all learning entities. We're constantly learning as we go through life, and that in and itself has meaning. And then you can apply that meaning in a more formal sense and say, well, I'm doing a formal piece of study. And so, but even if I wasn't, I would certainly be using the time to learn about all the sorts of different things that I'm interested in, and that I think is the importance of having that sense of meaning and the sense of purpose. And then often it's to apply that in the service of others, where you can really derive a lot of meaning. Your audience. Advisors know that only too well. They are motivated to serve other people, to help those people get a better outcome in their lives. I think that's been the better part of my, the last 40 years professionally, has been motivated to try and help people in whatever aspect, whether it's working in recruitment, trying to help people get a good job, or working in financial services, trying to help people retire in comfort, or plan for their kids' education, whatever the outcomes were. It was all about doing the best job you could to see they got the outcome they wanted. So
having a great partner that you can live with happily, purpose, a sense of purpose, and in service of others, right?
Yeah.
Serving.
And then you add in, obviously, as you get older, one of the things that a lot of people neglect is their fitness and their physical fitness. I've always been very active in sports, so I continue to stay active in a sporting way. Be careful with nutrition and diet. These things have a huge impact on you. So I think the idea is not just to you want to live a long life, but you also want to live a long, healthy life so that you can enjoy it. And so there are certain activities that I do now, where yes, I might have in the past run lots of miles, and I do less of that now because I know that it has a kind of a problematic impact on my knees. Whereas cycling, rowing, etc., not a problem. Swimming, not a problem. So you adapt to your the changes in your physical health, and but that is the outcome you want. Long, healthy life. You want to make sure that you've got the finance, the resources to maintain that through the whole of your life. That's what it's all about. So
good stuff. And then, so I know you're an avid reader. So what is it that you've been reading recently? What does that look like?
Candidly, Abraham, it's a lot of academic papers and journal articles. So it's the Journal of Wealth Management, Journal of Finance, Journal of Financial Planning. That's really a lot of what I've been reading. Last couple of books, there's if I was to pull them off my bookshelf, they would be academic texts like Introduction to Econometrics and things like that. So
wow.
Yeah, it's not really the one that you want on your bedside table. Well, maybe you do, because it will put you instantaneously to sleep.
No, this has been an incredibly valuable conversation, David. Just learning about your journey, learning a little bit about Dimensional, and some of the stuff that you've been working on and thinking. So on that note, I am going to say, David, thank you for your time, for your insight, and for the good work you do.
Thank you very much, Abraham. It's been a pleasure as always.
I'll be remiss if I don't thank my incredible team who worked very hard to put this program together, led by my producer, Hannah Dickinson. Thank you very much, guys. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Timeline app, the retirement planning software, and Batefolio, the high-tech, low-cost flat fee model portfolio manager. And to you, our listeners, thank you for your time. I hope you've had as much fun listening to the program as we have making it. You can find more about the show at retirementals.co.uk, and you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is Abraham on Money. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.